begin the questioning, just let me ask a number of questions, begin to you, Mr. Ambassador. With regards to peacekeeping, when can we realistically expect peacekeepers to be on the ground, displacing those who are being augmented out because of those conflicts that we all know that, and vested interests that have compromised their mission? Are we talking the fall? And is there any way to accelerate that process? Because, you know, delay is denial, obviously, for those who are being hurt or killed. Let me ask you as well, you know, and maybe this would be to you, Ms. Richard. My understanding is that our humanitarian assistance number is approximately $67 million. And the question would arise, why are faith-based organizations only getting $7.5 million, given the outsized role that they are playing in the Central African Republic? As we know, when Bishop Nungo was here, you know, he was concerned that he is sheltering 35,000 people, and how much assistance are we giving to those NGOs or faith-based entities that could have high impact because they know and are understood and respected by the people that they deal with. It seems that that ratio is very much skewed towards not helping faith-based entities, and if you could give, you know, some insight into that. Casper Ager from Enough makes the point in his testimony that combatants, politicians, businessmen, and diplomats were all giving him the same excuses and reasons for the crisis in the country: lack of leadership and exclusion of citizens. But he also makes the point and I thought this was very interesting, that one of the key drivers of violence is the diamonds and the poaching. And if you could speak to that issue, and that there is a need for sustained regional U.S. diplomatic engagement that looks at that aspect of it. You know, how do we dry up those nefarious enterprises? Let me also ask you as well, Madeleine Rose, in her testimony, points out that if we fail to address CAR's crisis quickly and correctly, Mercy Corps is concerned that the situation could metastasize into a new decades-long conflict, transcending the corridor from the Sahel to South Sudan, and makes the point that even with the anticipated EU reinforcements, the enormity of the challenge for peacekeepers outstrips capacities. Is this designed potentially to fail? You know, and I'm not assuming any ill will here, but is it being driven by insufficient resources? You just mentioned that other countries have not come through with their commitments. How much of an unmet need do we have with regards to peacekeeping? What kind of force is needed, ideally, I should say, to really end this violence? And is what is configured enough? Is the money enough? How much are we giving to peacekeeping? What are the others giving? And maybe this one could be for the records, but when you say other countries are not coming through, if there could be a listing of those countries, commitments made, commitments unmet, and, you know, there are large numbers of countries that could do a heck of a lot more, I would think, that are not doing it. And finally, and we'll have other questions, but maybe if you could start with those, and then I'll get back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As for the UN peacekeeping force, we anticipate their arrival in mid-September. However, I want to note that the UN has already had senior officials on the ground to do the planning and coordinating with the African Union and French forces, and European Union troops are beginning to arrive, and they've started to train 480 police and gendarmes from Central African Republic. We're also today having Assistant Secretary Thomas Greenfield, who's with Secretary Kerry in Addis Ababa, meet with the African Union to discuss the deployment of additional African troops from Burundi and Rwanda, and we hope that that will take place very soon, and we are positioned to move those troops quickly. These troops would replace the Chadians who withdrew at the end of March.
About how many are we talking about? And again, what would be the force that would make the difference, and are we getting close to that or at that number?
Mr. Chairman, I honestly don't know what the force needed is We will be going from 7,000 to about 8,200 with the arrival of these additional troops, assuming that the African Union approves both the Rwandan and Burundi contributions. But the EU presence will go from about 100 at present to 500 at present, so that will bring us up to close to 9,000.
Now, do military planners at the Pentagon and at the UN say that that is a sufficient force with a robust mandate to bring some peace to these people who are suffering?
Well, let me answer your question a bit differently, Mr. Chairman. In terms of displaced people in Bangui, we've seen the number decline from 500,000 to 200,000, which is not to suggest that the situation is not atrocious, and the removal of the Muslims and the flight of the Muslims contributes to those numbers, so I don't want to be misleading, but the fact that the number of internally displaced people in Bangui is declining, I think, shows that MISCA and the French forces are having some impact, and as we get these police and gendarmes trained, we are hopeful that those numbers will be sufficient to restore security. I think we are going to have to look at this on a regular basis and see what progress is being made, but to date, the progress is not adequate, and we acknowledge that. As for peacekeeping more broadly, our missions in the UN missions in Mali and South Sudan are both undersubscribed. We are in conversations with partners about plussing up those missions as well as contributing to the mission in the Central African Republic, but it has been a difficult process to identify capable peacekeepers. Finally, you spoke about diamonds and poaching. Central African diamond exports are currently suspended under the Kimberley process, but we are hopeful that as the government can restore authority in combination with the peacekeepers, that legal diamond exports can once again start, and this would provide the government with revenue that's needed to pay salaries and provide other basic services. As for poaching, because of the conflict, it's difficult to know how much poaching has taken place, but it's clearly a problem, and Central Africa is one of the countries that still has a significant population of elephants to poach.
Thank you.
On the question of the funding distribution, it is true the U.S. is providing nearly $7.5 million in funding to support conflict mitigation, reconciliation, and peace building, including interreligious peace building efforts. I would expect that these efforts would not require as much funding as the type of large-scale humanitarian operations that are being carried out for so many people in the Central African Republic and in the region. All of the neighboring countries are affected. And in addition, some of the non-governmental organizations that are responding to humanitarian work are indeed faith-based groups, and that includes Catholic Relief Service that is speaking today, and that gets funding from the USAID's Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, and they're on the list of one of the groups that's providing logistics support and relief commodities in the region. And then in addition, we had several high-level delegations go in, as you heard, and one of those was interfaith group from the U.S., so that's additional costs that are not reflected in the $7.5 million. I think we're doing a lot, and I think that some of it is reflected in the funding, and some of it is perhaps diplomatic efforts that are within the State Department's base budget. So we have the $100 million you've heard to support the current peacekeeping. We will support the UN's peacekeepers, as we do year in and year out, thanks to congressional appropriations. The $67 million in humanitarian assistance, working with non-governmental organizations that are across the country. And I think this network of non-governmental organizations that are our normal partners, but that are present in really sort of far-flung locations, hard-to-reach places across Central African Republic is very, very important for us. Working in the neighboring countries, the UN is moving people away from threats, as you've heard. The high-level visits, Samantha Power going twice, but also other groups. Our diplomats have participated in all the conferences on the Central African Republic that have taken place in New York, in Brussels, in Africa. We have now Stu Symington named as a special representative. We are looking into restoring the diplomatic presence in Bangui, and that was also going on during this early April set of visits. And then in addition to that, we have this money for conflict mitigation and peace building.
Could you provide us the list of groups that are getting the money, the humanitarian assistance?
Sure.
And what might be anticipated going forward, particularly as it relates to faith-based? Because again, I was moved, and I'm sure the subcommittee was, that Bishop Nungo was dealing with so much on an absolute shoestring. And he was not going to let a single person go unhelped, even if he didn't have the money. I mean, it was just, and it seems to me we need to be backstopping people that are on the ground, have the credibility, and have a record, as he and so many others do. And so I just hope we're not bypassing them unwittingly, or for any other reason. So if you could provide that for us, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. On the issue of other countries not providing funding,
Yeah.
the World Food Program resources are stretched thin, not just in the Central African Republic, but in the entire region. And it's a very difficult situation, and they're doing so much good work there and also in the Middle East with the Syria crisis, too. So I regularly meet with World Food Program colleagues. As you know, an American runs the World Food Program. One of their issues is that the European Union's humanitarians, ECHO, had a cash flow problem. So they will have funding later this year. They will provide it, but you can't go back in time and take that funding to feed people. And so this is an example where a cash flow problem, which is not unheard of in Washington sometimes, is actually having real damage on the ground. And so that's a shame. And then the other thing that we would like to do is bring new donors to the table. And we have succeeded in some respects with the Syria crisis in getting Gulf states more involved. But we need more countries to step forward and take up the humanitarian cause and provide funding so that the U.S. share stays at an appropriate level, a robust level, a healthy level, thanks to you all, but that also that it be a multilateral undertaking. Finally, you had asked about restoring law and order. I really think, in talking to experts, that it's not just a matter of peacekeepers, it's also a matter of the police, the judicial system, the prisons. This is not my area, but this is what I heard from people there. And so in coming back, Linda Thomas-Greenfield and I have met with Bill Brownfield, who's our counterpart, Assistant Secretary for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, and we're all working to try to figure out what particular role can the U.S. play, in addition to what other countries are doing, to help ordinary citizens enjoy the basic public safety that they used to enjoy in Bangui and other cities and towns.
Last thing, Mr. Ambassador, you said pre-genocidal stage at your last appearance here. Is it genocidal now?
Mr. Chairman, we really haven't considered the question of whether it's genocidal or not. The fact is, horrible atrocities are taking place, and we know that at least 2,000 people have died. I don't think it matters what word we use, but the situation is horrible, and we're doing everything we can to reverse it.
I appreciate that. I do think it matters, but I respect the difference.